Hey there. Tonight, we're slipping into the quiet corners of history, not to the grand halls of kings or the clash of armies, but to a small, flickering world lit by tallow and wax. We're talking about the daily life of a 17th century candle maker, someone whose hands shaped light itself in an age when darkness was more than just an inconvenience. It was a way of life. These were the people who worked late into the night, their fingers stained with grease, their homes thick with the smell of melted fat, crafting something so ordinary yet so essential that entire households depended on it. No fame, no fortune, just the steady rhythm of labor, the soft glow of a finished candle, and a life lived in the balance between fire and shadow. If this kind of slow, grounding history helps you drift off, feel free to like the video and subscribe, but only if it feels right. And drop a comment to tell me where you're listening from and what time it is. It's oddly comforting to know who's out there, settling into the same quiet story. So, dim the lights, maybe crack a window for that cool night air, and let's begin. Picture a small town in England, sometime in the 1660s. It's not London, with its sprawling streets and smoky skyline, but a market town, maybe 200 homes clustered around a church and a muddy square. The streets are narrow, cobbled in places, churned to muck in others. Your workshop sits on the edge of town, close enough to the market for trade, but far enough that the smell of your work doesn't bother the butcher or the baker. It's a simple building, timber-framed, with walls of wattle and daub, mud and straw packed tight to keep out the wind. The roof is thatched, sagging slightly, and the chimney is more of a hopeful hole than a proper flue. Inside, it's one room, maybe 15 feet by 10, with a packed dirt floor that's never quite clean. The air smells sharp and heavy, like animal fat and wood smoke, with a faint sweetness when you're working with beeswax. This is your world, and it's small, but it's yours. You're a chandler, a candle maker, though the term covers more than just candles. You also deal in soap, lamp oil, and sometimes even rushlights, cheap, greasy sticks of reed dipped in fat for those too poor to afford proper candles. Your trade isn't glamorous, but it's steady. Everyone needs light, from the wealthiest merchant to the humblest laborer. Without you, the world stops when the sun sets. Your days are long, your hands are rough, and your life is shaped by the seasons, the market, and the endless dance of supply and demand. You don't think of yourself as important, but you know your work matters. You see it in the way people's faces soften when they buy a bundle of your candles, like they're holding a small piece of security against the night. Your day starts before dawn, not because you're ambitious, but because the work demands it. The first task is to check the fire. The hearth in the corner of your workshop is the heart of your trade, a low stone pit where you keep a fire burning almost constantly. You banked it last night, covering the coals with ash to keep them alive, and now you coax them back to flame with a few sticks of kindling. The fire is your partner, but it's not always friendly. It smokes, it sputters, and if you're not careful, it can turn your whole livelihood to ash. You've learned to read its moods, to know when it needs more wood or when it's ready to melt your tallow. The fire is also your heat, your light, and sometimes your cook stove. It's everything, and you treat it with respect. Tallow is your main material, the fat rendered from sheep or cattle, bought from the local butcher, or sometimes collected from households willing to trade scraps for a discount on candles. It's stored in wooden barrels, and it's not pleasant. Tallow is greasy, pungent, and prone to spoiling. On warm days, it softens and weeps, leaving a slick film on everything it touches. On cold days, it hardens into lumps you have to chisel apart. You start the morning by scooping a portion into an iron cauldron hung over the fire. The fat melts slowly, filling the room with a smell that's equal parts meaty and sour. You stir it with a wooden paddle, skimming off bits of gristle or dirt that float to the surface. Purity matters, not for you but for your customers. A clean candle burns longer and smells less like a slaughterhouse. While the tallow heats, you prepare the wicks. These are made from twisted cotton or sometimes flax, bought in bulk from a weaver in town. You cut them to length, about a foot for a standard candle, and not one end to keep it from slipping through the mold. The molds are your pride, a set of pewter tubes you inherited from your father, each one polished smooth to make the candles easy to release. You thread the wicks through the molds, securing them at the bottom with a dab of clay and tying the tops to a wooden frame to keep them taut. It's fiddly work, and your fingers are clumsy from years of handling hot wax and cold tools. But you've done it so often it's second nature, like breathing. Once the tallow is melted and strained, you let it cool slightly. Too hot, and it'll burn the wicks or crack the molds. Too cold, and it won't pour evenly. You've learned the right temperature by feel, by the way the surface shimmers in the cauldron. You lift the cauldron with a cloth-wrapped handle, careful, always careful, and pour the liquid fat into the molds. The sizzle as it hits the cool pewter is satisfying, like the sound of rain after a dry spell. You set the molds aside to harden, knowing you'll have a batch of candles by midday if all goes well. If not, you'll have to remelt and try again. Waste isn't an option. Beeswax is a different story, a luxury you handle less often. It's expensive, reserved for churches, wealthy households, or special orders. When you get a batch, maybe from a local beekeeper who owes you a favor, it's like working with gold. The wax is sweet, clean, and pliable, and it burns with a steady, golden light that doesn't sputter or smoke. You don't use molds for beeswax candles. Instead, you dip them by hand, layering the wick in wax over and over until it's thick enough. It's slow, meditative work, and you do it on quieter days when the tallow orders are filled and you can afford to linger. The smell of beeswax is a rare treat, cutting through the usual stench of tallow like a spring breeze. By mid-morning, the town is awake. You hear the clatter of carts, the shouts of vendors setting up in the market square, the distant toll of the church bell marking the hours. Your wife or apprentice, maybe your eldest son, minds the workshop while you head to the market to sell yesterday's candles. You carry them in a basket, wrapped in cloth to keep them clean. The market is a riot of noise and color, with farmers hawking vegetables, weavers displaying cloth, and children darting underfoot. You set up in your usual spot, near the cooper's stall, and lay out your wares. Tallow candles for everyday use, rushlights for the poor, and, if you're lucky, a few beeswax candles for those willing to pay extra. Customers come in waves. A housewife buys a dozen tallow candles, haggling over the price because her husband's harvest was poor. A priest stops by, asking for beeswax for the altar, promising to pay next week. A tavern keeper takes a bundle of rushlights, grumbling about the cost but knowing he'll sell more ale if his patrons can see their mugs. You nod, you smile, you make change with the few copper coins you carry. Every sale is a small victory, another day's worth of bread or firewood secured. You don't dream of wealth, but you hope for enough. Enough to keep the roof patched, the fire burning, the pot simmering. That's the chandler's life. Not grand, but necessary, a quiet thread in the fabric of the town. From years of handling hot wax and cold tools. But you've done it so often it's second nature, like breathing. The molds are set in a row on a wooden bench, their dull pewter catching the firelight. You check each one, making sure the wicks are centered, because a crooked wick means a candle that burns unevenly, and an uneven candle means a disappointed customer. You've built your reputation on reliability, not flair, and you guard it carefully. Once the tallow is ready, you pour it into the molds, a slow, steady stream to avoid bubbles or spills. The liquid fat hisses as it fills each tube, and you watch the level rise, knowing exactly when to stop. You set the molds in a cool corner of the workshop, where the draft from the door won't disturb them. Cooling takes hours, sometimes longer in summer when the air is thick and warm. You don't rush it. Rushing leads to cracks, and cracked candles are good for nothing but remelting. While they set, you turn to other tasks, cleaning the cauldron, sweeping the floor, or starting a batch of rushlights for the poorer folk who can't afford molded candles. Rushlights are simple. You dip pithy reeds in melted tallow, let them dry, and dip again, building up layers until they're thick enough to burn for an hour or two. They're messy and smoky, but they're cheap, and you sell dozens every week. Your workshop is a study in organized chaos. Barrels of tallow line one wall, their lids sealed tight to keep out rats. Bundles of wicks hang from the rafters, alongside herbs, rosemary, and sage, to mask the smell of fat. Tools are scattered across the bench. A ladle, a knife, a pair of iron shears, all worn smooth from use. There's a small shelf for finished candles, wrapped in cloth to keep them clean, and a corner where you store beeswax when you can get it. The floor is stained with years of spills, and the walls are blackened from smoke. It's not a pretty place, but it's functional, and you know every inch of it like the back of your hand. By noon, the first batch of candles is ready to unmold. You tap the molds gently, easing the candles out one by one. They're pale and smooth, each one a small triumph. You trim the wicks, check for imperfections, and stack them in neat piles. A good day's work might yield 50 tallow candles, enough to sell at market and keep a few for your own home. You don't use candles much yourself. Tallow is too valuable, and you make do with the fire's glow or a rushlight when you need to see. But there's a quiet pride in holding a finished candle, knowing it'll light someone's table or bedside, maybe even a church altar if you've used beeswax. Lunch is simple, eaten on a stool by the hearth. Your wife brings a bowl of pottage, barley, leeks, maybe a bit of cabbage, thickened with a scrap of bread from yesterday. You share it, spooning from the same bowl, because there's no point in dirtying another. Water comes from the well, cloudy but safe enough if you boil it first. Ale is more common, a weak, homebrewed batch that's barely alcoholic but kills the worst of the well's taste. You eat quickly, not because you're rushed, but because there's always more to do. The fire needs tending, the next batch of tallow needs melting, and the market won't wait. Afternoon is for selling and bartering. You load a cart with candles and rushlights, maybe a few bars of soap if you've had time to make them. Soap is a sideline, made from tallow and wood ash, boiled until it thickens into a gritty paste. It's not the fine, scented stuff the gentry use, but it cleans well enough, and you sell it to laundresses and housewives who don't have time to make their own. The cart is heavy, and the road to the market is rutted, but you're used to it. You nod to neighbors as you pass, the cooper, the blacksmith, the widow who sells eggs. Everyone knows you, not as a friend, but as the chandler, the one who keeps the dark at bay. The market square is alive with activity. Stalls are piled with cabbages, apples, bolts of wool, and iron nails. A juggler performs for pennies, and a preacher shouts about salvation from the church steps. You find your spot and unpack, arranging the candles in neat rows. You don't call out like the fishmonger or the baker. Your wares speak for themselves. People come to you because they need to, not because you've charmed them. A farmer trades a sack of turnips for a dozen rushlights. A merchant's wife buys beeswax candles for her dining room, paying in silver that feels heavy in your palm. You haggle, but not too hard. You want customers to come back. By the time the church bell rings for vespers, your basket is lighter, and your pockets are heavier, though not by much. Back at the workshop, you unload the cart and count your earnings. Most of it's in goods, grain, vegetables, a bit of cloth, because coin is scarce. You store everything carefully, knowing winter is never far off. The day's not over yet. Evening is for maintenance. Sharpening tools, patching the roof, or rendering more tallow if you've got a fresh supply. You work by the light of a single rushlight. Its flame weak but steady. Your hands ache, your back protests, but you keep going. Rest is for after dark, when the town quiets and the stars take over. Night falls hard in the Dolores. The workshop is silent now, save for the crackle of the fire. You bank the coals, sweep the floor, and lock the door with a wooden peg. Your home is next door, a small cottage with a straw mattress and a table just big enough for two. You eat a quick supper, bread, cheese, and ale, then climb into bed, the day's work heavy in your bones. Sleep comes quickly, but it's not deep. You dream of wax and flame, of light that never fades, and you wake before dawn to do it all again. It's not an easy life, but it's yours, and in the quiet glow of a candle's flame, it's enough. The rhythm of your life as a chandler is dictated by more than just the sun and the seasons. It's shaped by the needs of your town, the demands of your customers, and the constant pressure to keep your workshop running. You're not just making candles. You're managing a delicate balance of resources, time, and relationships. Every choice you make, how much tallow to buy, how many candles to produce, who to sell to, carries weight. A misstep could mean a lean week, a broken tool, or a customer lost to a rival chandler in the next town. You've learned to think 2 steps ahead, not out of ambition, but out of necessity. Mornings are for production, but they're also for planning. As you stir the tallow over the fire, your mind is on the week ahead. The butcher promised a fresh batch of fat, but he's been unreliable lately, and you're low on stock. The weaver owes you wicks, but her son's been sick, so you might need to barter with someone else. The church needs beeswax candles for All Saints' Day, and that's a big order. One you can't afford to mess up. You tally these things in your head, because paper is scarce and you've never learned to write. Your memory is your ledger, and it's sharp from years of use. Your family is part of the business, whether they want to be or not. Your wife helps with the rushlights and soap, her hands as calloused as yours from years of work. Your eldest son, maybe 14, is learning the trade, though he's more interested in the tavern than the cauldron. You don't push him too hard yet. He'll come around when he realizes there's no other path. Your younger children, a girl of 10 and a boy of 6, run errands. Fetching water, carrying bundles to market, or sweeping the workshop floor. They're too small for the heavier tasks, but they know the smell of tallow as well as you do. This is their world, too, and they're growing into it step by step. The workshop isn't just a workplace. It's a school of sorts. If you're lucky, you have an apprentice, a boy from a neighboring family who's bound to you for 7 years. He's clumsy, always underfoot, but he's learning. You teach him how to strain tallow, how to thread wicks, how to spot a candle that's likely to drip. You don't coddle him. Mistakes are costly, and he needs to understand that. But you're patient in your own way, remembering how your father taught you, with sharp words and silent nods. The apprentice lives with you, sleeps on a pallet by the hearth, and eats from your pot. He's not family, but he's close, bound by work and obligation. Midday brings a shift in pace. The town is at its busiest, and you're often interrupted by visitors. A neighbor stops by to trade a sack of oats for a bundle of rushlights. A merchant's servant comes with an order for 20 beeswax candles, needed by tomorrow. The tavern keeper wants lamp oil, and he's short on coin, so you settle for a promise of ale. These interactions are the pulse of your trade. You're not just selling candles. You're building trust, swapping favors, and weaving yourself into the town's network. You know who's reliable, who's stingy, who's desperate. You don't write it down, but you don't forget. The afternoon is often spent outside the workshop. You might visit the butcher to haggle over tallow, or the beekeeper to check on wax. These trips are as much about gossip as they are about business. The butcher tells you the manor steward is raising taxes again. The beekeeper mentions a traveler who saw a fire in the next town. You listen, you nod, you store it away. Information is currency, and you're always trading. Back at the workshop, you might experiment with a new batch of soap, adding a pinch of lavender from the garden to see if it sells better. It's a risk. Herbs are expensive, but you're always looking for an edge. Evening is for the finer details. You sit by the fire, trimming wicks or polishing molds. The work is repetitive, almost soothing, and it gives you time to think. You worry about the winter, when tallow is harder to come by and the cold makes the wax brittle. You think about your son, wondering if he'll take over the trade or run off to sea like the cooper's boy. You think about the church, which looms large in your life. The priest is a steady customer, but he's also a reminder of your place in the world. You owe tithes, grain, candles, even a few coins, and you pay them not out of faith but because you don't want trouble. The church is a shadow you can't outrun. Night is when the world shrinks. You lock the workshop and head to your cottage, where the fire is low and the air is cool. Supper is simple: pottage, bread, maybe a bit of salted fish if the market was kind. You eat with your family, the children quiet from a day of work, your wife trading a few words about the neighbors. The meal is quick, and then it's time for sleep. Your bed is a wooden frame stuffed with straw, shared with your wife and the youngest child. The older children sleep on pallets nearby, and the apprentice curls up by the hearth. The room is crowded, but it's warm, and that's what matters. Sleep comes in waves, as it did for your ancestors. You drift into the first sleep, waking around midnight for no reason you can name. You might stir the fire, check the door, or just lie there, listening to the wind. This is when the world feels closest, when the line between you and the dark is thin. You think about the candles you've made, the light they'll bring to others. You don't pray much, but you might whisper a word or two, just in case. The second sleep is deeper, carrying you toward dawn. You dream of fire, of wax that never runs out, of a world where the dark doesn't press so close. When you wake, the cycle begins again. The 17th century is a world of contrasts, and as a chandler, you feel it in every part of your life. Your work is both humble and vital, a bridge between the mundane and the sacred. Candles aren't just for light. They're for prayer, for celebration, for mourning. They mark the rhythm of the church year, the feasts and fasts that shape your town's calendar. Your role in this cycle is small but undeniable, and it gives your days a sense of purpose, even when the work feels endless. Mornings often bring a visit from the church warden, a stern man with ink-stained fingers who manages the parish's supplies. He's here for candles, beeswax, always beeswax, for the altar. The church is your best customer, but also your most demanding. The candles must be perfect. No cracks, no uneven burns, no smoky wicks. You keep a special mold just for them, and you check each candle twice before wrapping it in linen. The church warden rarely pays in coin. Instead, you get a promise of grain from the tithe barn or a blessing from the priest. You accept it because refusing isn't an option. The church's goodwill keeps your trade alive, and you know it. The church isn't just a customer. It's the center of your world. Its bells mark the hours. Matins, vespers, compline, and you time your work by their sound. On Sundays, you close the workshop and walk to the stone church at the town's heart. The service is long, the Latin incomprehensible, but you stand with your neighbors, crossing yourself when the priest raises the host. You don't understand the words, but you feel the weight of them, the way they bind the town together. After Mass, you might linger in the churchyard, trading news with the blacksmith or the miller. These moments are as much a part of your life as the workshop, a chance to be more than just the chandler. Back at home, the afternoon is for the less glamorous tasks. You render tallow, a messy job that starts with chopping fat into small pieces. You boil it in a cauldron with water, stirring until the fat melts and separates from the gristle. The smell is worse than usual, sharp enough to make your eyes water, and you open the shutters to let the air circulate. Once the tallow is strained through a cloth, you pour it into barrels to cool. It's hard work, and it leaves your hands slick and your clothes stained, but it's the foundation of your trade. Without tallow, there are no candles, no rushlights, no soap. Your apprentice is a mixed blessing during these tasks. He's eager but careless, prone to splashing hot fat or forgetting to stir. You correct him sharply, not out of cruelty, but because a mistake could ruin a batch or start a fire. You've seen what happens when a workshop burns. Years of work gone in an hour, a family left with nothing. You teach him to respect the fire, to watch the cauldron, to move slowly when the fat is hot. He grumbles, but he listens, and you see him improving, bit by bit. One day, he might be a chandler himself, carrying your molds and your knowledge into the next generation. The market isn't just for selling, it's for scavenging. You keep an eye out for scraps, fat from the butcher, reeds from the riverbank, even old candle stubs that can be melted down. Waste is your enemy, and you've learned to make something out of nothing. A housewife might trade a basket of drippings for a rushlight. A tavern keeper might give you broken candles in exchange for oil. You collect these bits and pieces, storing them in the workshop like a magpie. Every scrap is a chance to stretch your supplies, to make it through a lean month or a harsh winter. Evening brings a rare moment of calm. You sit by the hearth, mending a torn sack or carving a new wooden spoon. Your wife might be spinning wool, her spindle a blur in the firelight, while the children play quietly with a straw doll or a carved stick. The apprentice is asleep, snoring softly by the hearth. These moments are fleeting, but they're precious. A reminder that your life is more than just work. You tell stories sometimes, not grand tales of knights or kings, but small ones. The time the butcher's pig escaped, or the day your father made a candle so perfect the priest kept it unlit as a relic. The children listen, their eyes wide, and you feel a quiet pride in passing something down, even if it's just a story. Night is a time of rituals. Before bed, you check the workshop one last time, making sure the fire is banked and the tools are put away. You hang a sprig of rosemary above the door, an old habit to ward off bad luck. Your wife murmurs a prayer as she tucks the children in, her voice soft but steady. You don't talk about spirits or witches, but you feel their presence in the dark, in the way the wind rattles the shutters. The world outside is vast and unknowable, and your small cottage is a fortress against it. You sleep lightly, one ear open for the sound of a crying child or a restless animal. Dreams are vivid in the 17th century, colored by the day's work and the night's quiet. You might dream of a candle that burns forever, its flame steady and golden. Or you might dream of the market, crowded with faces you don't recognize, their hands reaching for candles you can't make fast enough. When you wake for the midnight hour, you lie still, letting the dreams settle. The fire is low, the room is cold, and the world feels fragile, like a candle left too close to a draft. You pull the blanket tighter and wait for the second sleep, hoping tomorrow will be kind. The life of a 17th century chandler is woven into the fabric of the seasons, each one bringing its own challenges and rhythms. Spring is for renewal, summer for abundance, autumn for preparation, and winter for survival. As a candle maker, you feel these shifts not just in the weather but in the ebb and flow of your trade. The demand for candles spikes in the darker months, when the sun sets early and households cling to light like a lifeline. But the materials you need, tallow, wax, wicks, are tied to the land and its cycles, and you've learned to adapt, to plan, to make do. Spring is a busy time. The town shakes off winter's grip, and the market swells with new goods. Lambs, eggs, early greens. For you, it's the season to stock up on tallow. The butcher's yard is full, and you haggle for fat before it's claimed by others. The air is still cool, which makes rendering easier, the fat doesn't spoil as quickly, and the workshop stays bearable. You spend long days boiling and straining, filling barrels to last through summer, when slaughter slows and tallow is scarce. The beekeeper might bring you wax, too, if the hives have survived the cold. You pay dearly for it, sometimes in candles, sometimes in labor, but it's worth it. A single beeswax order from the church can keep you fed for a month. Summer brings its own demands. The days are long, and people need fewer candles, but you can't slack off. The heat makes tallow tricky. It softens in the barrels, attracting flies and turning rancid if you're not careful. You store it in the coolest corner of the workshop, covered with cloths to keep pests out. Molding candles is harder, too. The wax sets slowly, and you have to work early in the morning before the sun turns the room into an oven. You spend more time on soap and rushlights, which sell well to travelers passing through for the summer fairs. The market is lively, with minstrels and peddlers adding to the chaos, and you might barter for a new tool or a bolt of cloth if the day's sales are good. Autumn is your peak season. As the days shorten, every household stocks up on candles, and your workshop hums with activity. You're up before dawn, pouring tallow, dipping beeswax, trimming wicks. The apprentice is busier now, and you're grateful for his extra hands, even if he still forgets to clean the molds. The church orders extra candles for the Harvest Festival and All Souls' Day, when the town lights its graves to honor the dead. You work late, the fire burning bright as you fill orders for merchants, tavern keepers, and farmers. The air smells of apples and wood smoke, and the market is heavy with grain and wool. You trade candles for winter supplies, salt, dried fish, a sack of barley, knowing the cold is coming. Winter is the hardest. The town hunkers down, and the streets empty as snow or rain turns the roads to mud. Tallow is scarce. Most animals are kept alive for breeding, and the butcher has little to spare. You rely on your autumn stockpile, rationing it carefully. The cold makes the wax brittle, and you have to warm the molds by the fire to keep the candles from cracking. The workshop is freezing despite the hearth, and your fingers ache as you work. But winter is when your candles shine. Every home, from the manor to the meanest cottage, burns them through the long nights. You sell out quickly, and the coins or goods you earn are a bulwark against hunger. The church keeps you busy, too, with candles for Christmas and Epiphany. Their glow a reminder of hope in the dark. Your diet shifts with the seasons, though it's never lavish. Spring brings fresh herbs and the first eggs, which you add to your pottage. Summer offers berries and greens, a brief burst of flavor. Autumn is for apples and root vegetables, boiled or roasted over the fire. Winter is lean barley, dried peas, maybe a bit of cheese if you've bartered well. Meat is rare, a treat for feast days or a lucky trade. You drink ale year-round, brewed by your wife or bought from the tavern. It's weak, cloudy, and slightly sour, but it's safer than water and keeps you going through long days. Meals are eaten quickly, often standing, because the workshop always calls. The seasons also shape your health. Spring and summer bring fevers and rashes, spread by fleas or bad water. Autumn's damp brings coughs that linger. Winter is the worst. Colds, aches, and the ever-present fear of something worse, like the plague that swept through a decade ago. You rely on simple remedies. Herbs boiled into teas, a poultice of mustard for chest colds, or a prayer to St. Blaise for a sore throat. The wise woman in town knows more, and you trade candles for her salves when one of the children falls ill. You don't trust doctors. They're for the rich, and their cures sound like nonsense. You'd rather burn rosemary and hope for the best. Your home reflects the seasons, too. In spring, you patch the roof and sweep out the winter's grime. Summer means open shutters and a constant battle against flies. Autumn is for sealing cracks with clay and straw, preparing for the cold. Winter turns the cottage inward. You huddle by the fire, the children sleeping close to stay warm. The workshop is never far from your mind, even at home. You store extra wicks under the bed, tallow in the corner, and the smell of fat clings to your clothes no matter how often they're washed. The seasons are a cycle, but they're not predictable. A wet spring can ruin the harvest. A dry summer can empty the well. A harsh winter can trap you indoors for days. You've learned to read the signs, a red sky at dusk, a shift in the wind, the way the birds move, and you plan accordingly. But there's always uncertainty, a reminder that you're at the mercy of forces bigger than your workshop. You don't complain, you adapt. You make more rushlights when tallow runs low. You barter harder when coin is scarce. You pray a little louder when the snow piles up. And through it all, you keep the fire burning, because without it, there's no light, no warmth, no life. Your life as a chandler is not just about candles or the workshop. It's about the community that surrounds you, the web of relationships that keeps the town alive. You're not a lord or a merchant, but you're not a beggar either. You're a craftsman, a step above the laborers who toil in the fields, but still bound by the same rules of survival. Your place in the town is secure, but it's hard one, built on years of steady work and careful dealings. Everyone knows the chandler, not because you're loud or flashy, but because your candles are in every home, your rushlights in every hovel, your soap in every wash basin. Mornings often bring neighbors to your door. The cooper's wife might trade a loaf of bread for a rushlight, her hands dusted with flour as she chats about the weather. The blacksmith, red-faced from his forge, might ask for lamp oil, promising to fix your shears in return. These exchanges are more than transactions. They're the glue that holds the town together. You don't have much, but you share what you can. A spare candle for a sick neighbor, a bit of tallow for the widow who can't afford light. In return, they share with you a basket of apples, a mended shoe, a warning about the steward's mood. It's not charity. It's survival, a quiet agreement that no one gets through alone. The market is where these bonds are tested and strengthened. You're not just selling. You're reading the town's pulse. A farmer's tight-lipped barter tells you his harvest was poor. A merchant's lavish order means he's expecting a ship from London. You listen to the gossip swirling around the stalls. A new tax from the manor, a stranger seen on the road, a fever in the next village. You don't spread these stories, but you store them, knowing they might matter later. The market is also where you see the town's hierarchy in action. The manor's steward sweeps through, his cloak finer than anything you'll ever own, and you nod respectfully, keeping your eyes low. The priest passes and you touch your cap because his blessing could mean a big order. The laborers, their hands rough from the fields, haggle hardest, and you give them a little extra because you know what it's like to count every penny. Afternoon might take you beyond the town, to the manor or the mill. The manor is a world apart, a timber and stone house on a hill, its windows glazed with real glass. You go there rarely, maybe to deliver a special order of beeswax candles for the Lord's dining hall. The steward meets you at the gate, his ledger always open, and you answer his questions carefully. How many candles, how much wax, when you can deliver again. You don't linger. The manor is not your place, and the servants' glances remind you of that. The mill is different. A noisy, dusty place where you trade candles for flour or gossip with the miller about the harvest. These trips are a chance to stretch your legs, to see the world beyond your workshop, but they're also a reminder of how small that world is. The town is your universe, and everything outside it feels like a rumor. Evening is when the community comes alive in a different way. The tavern is the town's heart after dark, and you might stop there after a long day, trading a rushlight for a mug of ale. The room is loud with laughter and arguments, the air thick with smoke and the smell of spilled beer. You don't stay long, just enough to hear the latest news or share a story about the market. The tavern is where you feel most like a man, not just a chandler, where you can complain about the weather or laugh at the cooper's bad jokes. Your wife doesn't come here. Her community is the churchyard or the well, where women trade secrets and support. Your children have their own world, playing in the lanes with sticks and stones. Their laughter a reminder that life goes on, even in hard times. The church binds the community most tightly. Feast days are the high points. Christmas, Easter, the harvest festival, when the town gathers to eat, drink, and forget the daily grind. You bring candles for the altar, and the priest might nod in approval, a rare moment of recognition. The feast is held in the churchyard or the manor's hall, with tables groaning under bread, ale, and the occasional roast. You sit with your neighbors, your children on your knee, and for a few hours the world feels generous. But the church also demands its due. Tithes are non-negotiable, and you give what you can: candles, grain, a few coins, knowing the priest is watching. You don't resent it, not exactly. It's just part of life, like the rain or the cold. Night brings the community closer, in a way. As you lock the workshop and head home, you see the glow of candles in every window, each one a small piece of your labor. Your cottage is full of familiar sounds. Your wife's soft humming, the children's whispers, the apprentice's snores. You check the fire, bank the coals, and climb into bed, the straw mattress creaking under your weight. Sleep is a shared experience, with your family close and the dark pressing in. You dream of the market, of faces you know, of candles burning in a church you'll never leave. The town is in your bones, and you in its, a quiet partnership that carries you through. As a chandler, your life is shaped by the tools and materials that define your trade, but it's also shaped by the risks that come with them. Fire, scarcity, and the fragility of your health are constant companions, lurking in the background of every day. You've learned to live with them, to work around them, but you never forget they're there. Your workshop is a place of creation, but it's also a place of danger, where a moment's carelessness could undo everything you've built. Mornings often start with a careful inspection of your tools. The pewter molds, handed down from your father, are your most valuable possession, worth more than your cottage and everything in it. You check them for dents or cracks, polishing them with a cloth to keep the candles smooth. The iron cauldron, blackened from years of use, is next. Its handle is loose and you tighten it with a twist of wire. The wooden paddle, worn smooth by your grip, needs no attention. It's as familiar as your own hand. These tools are your livelihood, and you treat them like extensions of yourself, knowing that a broken mold or a cracked cauldron could mean weeks of lost work. The fire is both your ally and your enemy. You keep it burning day and night, feeding it with wood you've bartered for or gathered from the nearby forest. The hearth is small but sturdy, built from stones you hauled yourself when you first set up the workshop. You've learned to judge the fire's heat by its color: red for melting tallow, orange for rendering fat, white hot only when you're desperate to finish a batch. But fire is unpredictable. A stray spark could ignite the thatch roof, or a gust of wind could knock over the cauldron, sending molten fat across the floor. You've seen it happen to others. A chandler in the next town lost everything last year, and you take no chances. You keep a bucket of water by the door, and you never leave the fire unattended. Tallow itself is a risk. It's flammable, especially when it's hot, and you've burned your hands more times than you can count. The scars are small but numerous, a map of your trade etched into your skin. Tallow is also prone to spoiling, especially in summer, when the workshop turns humid and the barrels attract mold. You've learned to store it with care, sealing the lids with wax and checking for the telltale sour smell that means a batch has gone bad. When it does, you boil it again, hoping to salvage something, but sometimes you have to throw it out, a loss that stings like a missed sale. Scarcity is another constant threat. Tallow depends on the butcher, who depends on the farmers, who depend on the weather. A bad harvest or a sickly herd can mean no fat for weeks, and you've learned to stretch what you have. You mix tallow with beeswax when you can afford it, or you make more rushlights which use less fat. Wicks are another worry. Cotton and flax are expensive, and the weaver isn't always reliable. You've tried making your own from twisted straw, but they burn too fast and smoke too much. Beeswax is a luxury you can't always count on. The beekeepers' hives fail some years, and when they do, the church turns to chandlers in bigger towns, leaving you with empty molds and a lighter purse. Your health is as fragile as your supplies. The workshop is a breeding ground for ailments. Smoke irritates your lungs, fat clogs your pores, and the constant crouching over the fire stiffens your back. You cough more than you used to, a dry rasp that worsens in winter. Cuts from trimming wicks or chopping fat can fester, and you've seen men lose fingers to infections that started small. You rely on your wife's remedies, honey for a sore throat, sage for a fever, but mostly you work through the pain. Stopping isn't an option. The market doesn't wait, and the church doesn't forgive late deliveries. Afternoon might bring a moment to assess these risks. You sit by the hearth, sharpening your knife, and think about the future. The apprentice is learning, but he's young, and you wonder if he'll stay. Your son is old enough to take over one day, but his heart isn't in it, and you can't force him. The workshop is yours, but it's also a burden, tied to the manor's taxes and the church's tithes. You owe a portion of your goods every year, and the steward's visits are a reminder that your work isn't fully your own. You don't dream of rebellion, such thoughts are for fools, but you dream of ease, of a day when the fire doesn't need tending, when the tallow doesn't run low. Evening is for small repairs. You patch a hole in the wall with mud and straw, or you mend a torn sack by the firelight. The children are asleep, their breaths soft in the crowded cottage. Your wife might be mending a tunic, her needle glinting in the glow of a rushlight. These quiet moments are when you feel the weight of your life. Not heavy, but present, like the smell of tallow that never leaves your skin. You don't talk much, but you don't need to. The rhythm of your days, the shared work, the shared risks, bind you closer than words ever could. Night is when the risks feel closest. You lock the workshop, double-checking the fire, and step into the cottage. The dark is thick, broken only by the faint glow of coals. You lie in bed, listening to the wind, and think about tomorrow. Will the butcher deliver? Will the church pay on time? Will the fire behave? Sleep comes, but it's restless, colored by dreams of sparks and empty barrels. You wake in the midnight hour, staring into the dark, and wonder if you've done enough to keep the light burning. The second sleep pulls you under, and you drift, hoping for a dawn that brings no new disasters. Your life as a chandler is a tapestry of routine and resilience, but it's also marked by moments of quiet joy and subtle pride. Amid the grind of tallow and fire, there are flickers of beauty, the glow of a well-made candle, the gratitude in a customer's nod, the warmth of your family huddled close. These moments don't erase the hardship, but they make it bearable, grounding you in a world that's often harsh and uncertain. Mornings sometimes bring small victories. You pull a batch of candles from the molds, and they're perfect. Smooth, pale, with wicks centered like the spine of a book. You hold one up, turning it in the firelight, and feel a craftsman's satisfaction. It's not art, not like the weaver's cloth or the goldsmith's rings, but it's yours, a thing made well. You set it aside for the church, knowing the priest will notice the care you took. Or maybe the beekeeper delivers a block of wax, its honeyed scent cutting through the tallow stench, and for a moment, the workshop feels like a different place, one where luxury isn't just for others. The market is another source of quiet joy. It's not the coins or the bartered goods, though those matter, but the rhythm of connection. A housewife smiles as she tucks your candles into her basket, saying they'll light her daughter's wedding. A child, no older than your own, clutches a rushlight like it's a treasure, his eyes wide at the thought of light in his family's dark cottage. These interactions are fleeting, but they remind you why you keep going. Your work isn't just about survival. It's about giving others a way to push back the night, to gather around a table, to pray or laugh or dream. Afternoon might bring a rare pause. If the tallow is melted and the molds are cooling, you step outside, leaning against the workshop's timber wall. The air is sharp with the smell of earth and hay, and the town hums in the distance. Cartwheels creaking, a dog barking, the faint toll of the church bell. You watch a hawk circle above the fields, its wings catching the sun, and for a moment, you're not the Chandler, just a man breathing in the world. These moments are stolen, never long, but they recharge you, like a candle wick drawing wax to keep the flame alive. Your family is the heart of your joy, even if it's rarely spoken. Your wife's laugh, rough from years of smoke and work, breaks through when you tell a story about the market's chaos. Your daughter, with her quick fingers, helps thread wicks, and you catch her humming a tune from the church. Your son, despite his restlessness, surprises you by fixing a broken mold, his face flushed with pride when you nod approval. The youngest clings to your leg, smearing tallow on your apron, and you lift him up, his weight a reminder of how fast time moves. These are the threads that hold you together, stronger than any wick or wax. Evening often carries a sense of ritual that feels sacred, even if it's not tied to the church. You sit by the fire, carving a toy for the children. A horse, maybe, its lines crude but recognizable. Your wife might card wool, her movements steady as a heartbeat, while the apprentice whittles a stick, trying to mimic your work. The firelight softens the room, and the smell of pottage lingers, mixing with the ever-present tallow. You don't talk much, but the silence is warm, filled with the unspoken understanding of a family that works as one. Sometimes you tell a tale from your own childhood, how your father burned his beard leaning too close to the fire, and the children giggle, their voices a balm against the day's weight. The church, for all its demands, offers moments of awe. On a feast day, you step inside and see your candles burning on the altar, their flames steady in the dim nave. The air smells of wax and incense, and the priest's voice echoes, a sound that feels older than the stones. You're not devout, not in the way the church expects, but you feel something standing there, watching your work light the space where the town comes to pray. It's a quiet pride, not boastful, but deep, like the roots of the oak in the churchyard. Night is when these joys settle into you. You lock the workshop, the wooden pegs sliding into place with a satisfying thud. In the cottage, the fire is low, and your family is already in bed, their shapes soft under blankets. You slip in beside your wife, the straw mattress shifting under you, and listen to the sounds of the night, the wind, the distant hoot of an owl, the creak of the cottage settling. Sleep comes in its familiar waves, and your dreams are kinder tonight. You see a field of candles, each one burning bright, or a market where everyone knows your name. The midnight waking is brief, and you lie there, feeling the warmth of your wife's back, the weight of a life that's hard but full. When the second sleep takes you, it's deep, carrying you toward a dawn you know will come. You'll wake to the same tasks, the same risks, the same small world. But you'll also wake to the glow of a candle you made, the sound of your children's voices, the nod of a neighbor who trusts your work. It's not a grand life, but it's enough, a flame that holds steady against the dark. Your days as a chandler are a delicate dance with time, not just the hours of the day, but the slow march of years. You're not old yet, but you feel the weight of your trade in your joints, in the ache of your hands after a long day of pouring wax. You've been at this since you were a boy, learning at your father's side, and now you're teaching your own son, hoping he'll carry the molds forward. Time is both your ally and your adversary. It brings skill and reputation, but it also brings change, and change is rarely kind in the 17th century. Mornings often start with a glance at the past. You pick up the pewter molds, their surfaces worn smooth by decades of use, And remember your father's hands guiding yours, showing you how to thread a wick just so. He's gone now, taken by a fever 10 winters ago, but he's still in the workshop, in the tools he left behind, in the way you stir the tallow with the same slow rhythm he did. You wonder what he'd think of you now, running the trade alone, balancing the church's demands and the market's haggling. You hope he'd be proud, but you'll never know, and that's a quiet ache you carry. The market is where you feel time most acutely. Faces change. Children grow into traders. Old men vanish from their stalls. New voices join the clamor. The butcher you've known for years is slower now, his hands trembling as he cuts fat for your barrels. The weaver's daughter, once a girl who played in the mud, now runs her mother's stall, her eyes sharp as she barters for wicks. You see yourself in the middle of this cycle, not young anymore but not yet old, your hair flecked with gray, your step still steady but not as quick. The market is a mirror, showing you where you stand in the town story. Afternoon might bring thoughts of the future. As you strain a batch of tallow, you think about your son, who's at that age where he's half man, half boy, torn between the workshop and dreams of something else. You see him watching the travelers at the market, their tales of London or the sea sparking something in his eyes. You don't blame him, youth is for dreaming, but you worry. The trade is all you have to give him, the molds and the knowledge that kept you fed. If he leaves, what becomes of the workshop? You nudge him toward the cauldron, showing him how to skim the fat, hoping the work will anchor him. But you know you can't hold him forever. Your apprentice is another piece of the future, a boy who might carry your trade if your son doesn't. He's better now, less clumsy, his hands finding the rhythm of the molds. You catch him mimicking your movements, the way you tilt the cauldron or trim a wick, and it stirs a strange mix of pride and melancholy. One day he'll be a chandler, maybe in this town, maybe somewhere else. You teach him everything, how to judge the fire, how to haggle without losing a customer, how to make a candle that burns clean. But you also teach him the unspoken things. Patience, caution, the weight of a life tied to fire and wax. Evening is when time feels softest. You sit by the hearth, the day's work done, and watch your family in the firelight. Your wife's face is lined now, but her eyes are the same as when you married her, sharp and warm. Your daughter, growing too fast, braids her hair with careful fingers, already talking about the market like she's ready to run it. The youngest, curled on a pallet, clutches the wooden horse you carved, his dreams untouched by the worries that keep you awake. These moments are a gift, a pause in the relentless tick of time. You don't talk about the future, but it's there, in the way you rest your hand on your wife's shoulder, in the way you watch your children breathe. The church is a reminder that time is bigger than you. Its stones have stood for centuries, and your candles are just a flicker in its long story. On a quiet evening, you might walk to the churchyard, not for mass but to stand among the graves. Your parents are here, their names weathered on wooden markers, and you know you'll join them one day. The thought doesn't scare you, not exactly. It's as natural as the seasons, but it makes you want to leave something behind, even if it's just a well-made candle or a son who knows how to keep the fire burning. Night is when time stretches and folds. You lie in bed, the cottage quiet save for the creak of the roof and the soft snores of your family. The dark is a canvas for memory and hope. You think of your childhood, running through the lanes with a stick for a sword, never imagining the weight of the workshop. You think of tomorrow, the tallow you need to buy, the candles you need to pour. You think of years from now, when your hands might shake too much to hold the ladle, when your son or your apprentice will take your place. Sleep comes, and your dreams are a jumble of past and future. A market where your father sells candles, a church where your children light the altar, a fire that never goes out. The midnight waking is gentle tonight. You stir, feeling the cold air on your face, and listen to the world holding its breath. The stars are out there, beyond the thatch, and you wonder what they see. A town of flickering lights, a chandler who keeps them burning. The second sleep pulls you back, deep and dreamless, and you rest in the knowledge that tomorrow, you'll rise again, light the fire, and keep time moving forward, one candle at a time. The life of a 17th century chandler is not just a personal story but a thread in the larger tapestry of a world in flux. The 1660s are a time of recovery and tension. England is rebuilding after civil war, the monarchy is restored, and whispers of science and trade are starting to challenge old ways. You feel these currents faintly, like ripples reaching your small town. Your candles light the same world they always have, but that world is shifting, and you sense it in the traveler's tales, the manor's demands, and the church's tightening grip. Mornings often bring news from beyond the town. A peddler, his pack heavy with trinkets, stops by the workshop to trade a candle for a story. He speaks of London, where the Great Fire burned half the city just a few years ago, and you listen, stirring the tallow, imagining streets you'll never see. He mentions new machines, things called engines, and ships sailing to places with names like Virginia and Bombay. You nod, not fully understanding, but the words stick with you, a reminder that your town is a speck in a larger world. You wonder if these changes will reach you, if they'll make candles obsolete or bring new markets for your wares. The market is where the wider world brushes closest. A merchant from a bigger town might pass through, his cart loaded with fine cloth or spices, and he buys your best beeswax candles, paying in coin that bears the king's face. He talks of taxes and wars, of Dutch ships blockading the coast, and you sense the strain in his voice. You don't know much about kings or wars, but you know taxes. The manor steward has been stricter lately, demanding more grain, more candles, more of everything. You keep your head down, but you feel the pressure, like a storm building beyond the hills. Afternoon might bring a visit from the manor's steward himself, a man whose fine boots never seem to touch the mud. He's here to check your output, to ensure the Lord's household has enough light for the winter. You show him your stock, the neat rows of tallow and beeswax, and he nods, but his eyes are cold, calculating. The manor is changing, too. There's talk of new crops, of enclosing fields, of pushing tenants off land they've worked for generations. You're not a tenant, but you supply those who are, and their struggles ripple to you. If the farmers have less, they buy fewer candles, and you feel the pinch. The church is another anchor to the wider world, but it's also a source of unease. The priest preaches about loyalty to the king and obedience to God, but you hear rumors of dissent. Puritans in the next town, Catholics hiding in the woods. You don't take sides. Politics is for those with power. But you notice the priest's sermons growing sharper, his demands for candles more urgent, as if light can ward off heresy. You make the candles, you pay the tithes, and you stay quiet. The church is your lifeline, but it's also a reminder that you're watched, that your small life is part of something bigger and less forgiving. Evening is when these larger concerns fade, replaced by the immediate world of your family and workshop. You sit by the fire, teaching your daughter to knot a wick, her small hands clumsy but eager. Your son is out, probably at the tavern, and you hope he's not listening to travelers' tales of adventure. Your wife patches a blanket, her needle moving with the same precision you use to pour wax. The apprentice, growing bolder, asks about London, and you tell him what little you know, half from the peddler, half from your own imagination. These moments ground you, pulling you back from the world's uncertainties to the familiar smell of tallow and the warmth of the hearth. The wider world creeps into your dreams, though. At night, as you lie in the crowded cottage, you see strange things. A city of fire, a ship with sails like clouds, a church where the candles burn blue. The midnight waking is restless tonight, and you step outside, the cold biting your face. The stars are sharp, and you wonder about the places the peddler described, places where candles might be made by machines or where light comes from something other than wax. The thought is unsettling, but it's distant, like a storm that might never reach you. You go back to bed, and the second sleep is heavy, pulling you into a dreamless dark. When you wake, the world is still yours, the workshop, the fire, the molds waiting to be filled. The peddler's stories, the steward's demands, the priest's warnings, they're all there, but they're not your life. Your life is the weight of the cauldron, the hiss of tallow, the glow of a candle you made with your own hands. You light the fire, stir the fat, and start another day, knowing that whatever the world brings, you'll keep the light burning, because that's what you do. Your life as a chandler is a quiet rebellion against the dark, a daily act of creation that holds the night at bay. But it's also a life of limits, defined by the boundaries of your town, your trade, and your body. You don't dream of greatness. Such thoughts are for poets or lords, but you dream of steadiness, of a life where the fire burns true, the tallow never runs dry, and your family is safe. The 17th century doesn't offer much room for dreams, but you carve out space for them, small and stubborn, in the margins of your days. Mornings bring a rhythm so familiar it's almost sacred. You light the fire, the coals waking with a soft crackle, and check the tallow barrels, hoping yesterday's batch hasn't gone sour. The workshop is cold, the air sharp with the bite of early frost, and you rub your hands to warm them before threading wicks. Today, you're making rushlights for the laborers who've been hit hard by the manor's new taxes. They can't afford candles, but they'll trade a few eggs or a bundle of firewood for light. You dip the reeds carefully, building layers of fat, knowing each one is a small defiance against their hardship. The market is quieter now, the autumn bustle fading as winter looms. You set up your stall, the wind tugging at your cloak, and arrange the candles in tight rows. A widow stops by, her face lined with worry, and trades a worn shawl for a single beeswax candle, her only luxury, saved for Christmas. You give her an extra rushlight, slipping it into her basket when she's not looking. It's not much, but it's what you can do. The market teaches you this. Small acts matter, not because they change the world, but because they keep it human. Afternoon is for the church, a delivery you can't delay. The priest needs candles for the Advent season, and you carry a bundle of beeswax to the stone church, its shadow long across the square. The church warden meets you, his ledger open, and counts each candle with a frown, as if expecting a flaw. You stand silent, your breath visible in the chilly nave, and watch your candles placed on the altar. Their glow feels like a piece of you, steady and warm, even as the church's demands weigh heavier each year. You leave with a sack of barley, payment not coin, and a reminder of your place. Evening brings the workshop back to life. Your son is there, reluctantly stirring the cauldron, and you guide his hands, showing him how to skim the fat without splashing. He's quieter these days, his dreams of the sea fading under the reality of winter's approach. You don't push him, but you hope the work is sinking in, binding him to the molds as it bound you. Your daughter sits by the fire, knotting wicks with a skill that surprises you, and you realize she might be the one to carry the trade if your son won't. The thought is bittersweet, a mix of pride and worry for her future. Night falls and the town grows still. You lock the workshop, the familiar peg sliding into place, and step into the cottage. Your wife is mending a cloak, her fingers steady despite the cold. The children are asleep, their faces soft in the fire's glow, and the apprentice is whittling, his knife catching the light. You sit for a moment, carving a new handle for the ladle, the wood yielding under your blade. The silence is full, not empty, carrying the weight of the day and the promise of tomorrow. You don't speak of dreams, but they're there, in the way you glance at your family, in the way you bank the fire with care. Sleep comes as it always does, in waves. The first is shallow, colored by the day's small triumphs. A perfect candle, a kind word at the market. The midnight waking is brief, just long enough to hear the wind and feel the cottage's warmth. You think of the rushlights you made, burning in homes too poor for anything else, and it's enough to ease you back to sleep. The second sleep is deeper, a dark pool where dreams of fire and light mingle with the faces of your children. You wake to the faint gray of dawn, ready to light the fire again, to keep the cycle turning.